I'm sure none of you need me to tell you what a VCA group does, and that's the reason why we've chosen to refer to these faders as VCAs. Obviously it's a digital console, so there aren't any voltage controlled amplifiers in here as such. However, if I refer to these faders as VCAs, you know how to use them, how they'll behave, and what to do with them. This VCA fader will control the level of all of the members of that group. The VCA select button will bring all of the members of the VCA group up onto the local surface. So if I need to access one of the keyboard channels, I select the keyboard VCA, it immediately brings up all of the keyboard channels. If I need to access one of my effects returns, I select the effects returns VCA, that then brings up all of the effects returns. To program a VCA group, we push and hold the VCA select button down and then just tap whichever channels we want to become members of that VCA group. The VCA grouping is snapshot specific, so within every snapshot of my show, the assignments, the colours and the names of the VCA groups can change with every snapshot. Here's a tip. If you're doing a festival, lay the console out for the largest lineup you'll be running on that day. Then as bands come up with fewer input requirements, you just drop the channels they're not using out of the VCA groups. For example, if I've got a keyboard setup which doesn't include a Leslie cabinet, if I just drop the Leslie channels out of that VCA, then as the engineers mixing this band, they'll never be presented with any of the Leslie channels. Likewise for the guitars and the unused drum channels, they'll never appear on the surface. So each band's engineer is only ever presented with channels that are actually active for their band. The idea of using colours to navigate consoles isn't something that we thought of. We watched the way that people operate analog mixers, because on all of our analog mixers we gave you write-on strips with channel numbers on, and the first thing that you do is you cover up the numbers with tape and you write on the names of the instruments. You will then use different coloured bits of PVC tape to identify groups of like instruments. Some people then go to the extent of pulling off the coloured fader knobs and swapping these around. So again, identifying channels by colour instead of having to take time to read what's written on the strip. So we've just taken that way of thinking and applied it to a digital console. So this is the equivalent of coloured PVC tape and swapping the coloured fader knobs around. The colours are entirely down to the operator. I've chosen to use red for the drum kit, but it's entirely up to you. If your drummer's playing a yellow drum kit, then you could choose to use yellow for the drums. If the guitarist is wearing a purple shirt, you might choose to use purple for the guitarist. When it comes to mixing monitors, most monitor engineers don't use VCA groups because most monitor engineers don't use input faders, and VCA groups are only any good for controlling input faders. If you're mixing monitors, you can use the VCA groups purely for navigational purposes. So you can have a group of inputs which are a specific musician's primary input channels. So when you're operating it as a monitor console, you name a mix for a musician, you name a group of inputs for a musician's primary channels, you then are only 2 button presses away from anything that that musician may ask you to do. So 1 button press gives you their audio, their graphic EQ, and the fader contributions to their mix. Selecting their group gives you their primary inputs. So straight away you're in a position to do whatever it is they might want you to their mix. Okay, to choose names and colours for the VCA groups, we go to the group sheet. We can then choose any colour we want off the colour palette. Click in the text field, and then using the USB keyboard just type in whatever combination of numbers or characters we need to identify that VCA. And again, everything we're looking at here is snapshot specific. If I click on the little paint pot icon to the right of the VCA groups, all of the members of that VCA group will then adopt that VCA group's colour. However, I can then go in and edit the individual channels as I have here, just by throwing in the occasional different coloured group to help me navigating around the console.